Every evening, Trang laughed at the sound of her blind mother feeling along the wall for her chair. She never once imagined that one day she would be the one left in the dark with no hand left to reach for. Hua had been blind for 10 years, but she knew this little apartment by heart, every corner and crack, every door her husband had painted by hand. Her husband used to read the newspaper out loud to her every morning, so the darkness would feel less empty. After he was gone, the mornings went very quiet. This home was all he left her, along with the small savings of 2 lifetimes of work. When he died, she gave a key to her daughter Trang, so she would never be alone. She thought she was opening her home to family. She was opening a door she could not see through. Trang came with her husband, Tuan, a smiling man with soft hands and a softer voice, the kind who shakes your hand warmly while his eyes count your pockets. To the whole building. Tuan was perfect. He carried groceries up the stairs and called the old woman mother, loud enough for every neighbor to hear. The old caretaker, Vin, watched from the bottom of the stairs and said nothing. He had swept those steps for 30 years. He knew the difference between a kind man and a man practicing one. Behind the closed door, the performance always ended. Trang liked to move the furniture and wait. She would watch her mother's shin find the sharp corner of the table she had shifted, and she would laugh out loud. "Careful, mother," she would say, never rising to help. "You'd lose your own head if it weren't attached." Only one person in that home ever reached for Hua's hand. Her little granddaughter May, 6 years old and full of questions no one wanted to answer. "Mama," May asked one night, "why do you laugh when Grandma can't see where to go?" Trang told her to mind herself and sent her to bed without an answer. Tuan didn't care about the apartment at first. Then one afternoon he found the deed in a drawer and the savings book tucked inside her husband's old folded coat. After that, his voice changed when he spoke to Chong at night, soft, patient, planting a seed. "All that money just sitting there," he would whisper, "and she can't even see it." Hua heard more than they ever guessed. Blindness had sharpened her ears the way a dark room sharpens the light of a single candle. She heard the greed long before she understood the plan. She told herself she was wrong. A mother will twist herself into any shape to keep believing the best of her own child. The cruelty grew bolder until they stopped bothering to hide it. At the market one morning, Hua reached for the wrong stall, and Chang called out so the whole street could hear. "Wrong way! Are you blind?" Then she laughed at her own joke. They served her cold rice and swore it was warm. They hid her cane and watched her search the floor for it on her hands and knees. When she asked to hold her own savings book just to feel it in her hands, Tuan patted her arm and said the bank was keeping it safe for her. Vin, the caretaker, saw it in pieces, the bruise on her wrist, the way she flinched at the sound of her own daughter's footsteps. So he began leaving warm bread by her door. He never knocked. He never said a word. He only wanted the blind woman to know that somebody in this world still saw her. The night it happened, they were gentle with her. That was how Hua knew something was very wrong. Tuan laid the papers in front of her and guided her hand to the empty line. "It's just for your pension, mother," he said warmly. "So the state keeps paying for your medicine." She could not read it. That was the whole point. For years they had mocked her blindness. Now they had found a use for it. Hua held the pen and went still. "Read it to me," she said softly. "All of it out loud." Chang's patience tore. "Just sign it, you stubborn old woman. We feed you. We clean up after you. This is the least you owe us." For a moment, Hua's fingers found her daughter's hand on the table. She squeezed it the way she used to when Chong was a frightened little girl in a thunderstorm. Chong pulled away. So Hua signed, not because she believed them, because she finally understood she had already lost them, and her name on a page was the last thing left to take. What none of them saw was the man standing in the hallway. Vin had come to leave his bread. Through the gap in the door, he saw a blind woman sign away her home to the people laughing at her, and he saw the name printed at the top of that page, not the government's Tuan's. That night, Vin did something he had not done in 30 years of minding his own business. He sat down, opened an old notebook, and began writing every single thing down. With the deed now in his name, Tuan stopped pretending. The apartment was his to sell, and a blind old mother was bad for the asking price. They told Hua she was going somewhere better. They packed one small bag for 60 years of a life. May wrapped her arms around her grandmother's legs and would not let go. Chung pried the child off as if grief were just a mess to be wiped up. At the door, Hua stopped and turned toward the sound of her daughter's breathing. "I forgive you," she said. "You will need to remember that one day." Chung laughed and shut the door. The turn of that lock was the last sound Hua ever heard inside the home her husband built for her. They left her at a grim county shelter on the far side of the city and drove off before the paperwork was even finished. She had lost her home, her savings, her daughter, and the one small warm hand that used to find hers in the dark. Everything and everyone gone in a single afternoon. But across the city, under a bare bulb, an old caretaker was still writing, and he was no longer the only one who had started to wonder about Tuan. Here is the truth about a man who will rob the blind. He never stops at one. The money from Hua's apartment was already promised to men far more dangerous than Tuan pretended to be. He had borrowed against a home that wasn't even his yet, gambled the money, and lost. Selling his mother-in-law's apartment was never going to make him rich. It was only going to keep him breathing. So the morning the sale closed, Tuan took all of it. The savings, the deed money, even the cash Chong had added of her own. And he was gone before the sun came up. Chong woke to an empty closet, a drained bank account, and an apartment that was no longer hers. Overnight, she had been stripped of everything exactly the way her mother had been. The new owners arrived with the very papers Tuan had made her mother sign. They were polite about it. They gave her 1 week to leave the home she had thrown her own mother out of. She called Tuan 1,000 times. The line was dead. She had laughed at her mother for reaching into the dark and touching nothing. Now she finally understood exactly how that felt. Little May looked up at her crying mother and asked the same question she once asked about Grandma. "Mama, why is nobody coming to help you?" The neighbors who used to beam at the charming couple now looked away when Chung passed in the hall, the same way she had taught the whole building to look away from her mother. Then came a knock. Knock Tuan, an old man with a worn notebook. The caretaker she had stepped past 100 times and never once truly seen. "You never looked at me either," Vin said quietly. "People like you never do. But I saw all of it, and I wrote every word down." Vin's notebook and the building's old hallway camera told the police everything. The forged pension story, the laughing, the lie printed at the top of that page. Could not undo what Tuan had already scattered to the men he owed. But it cleared Hua's name, unwound the sale, and put the apartment back where it belonged. Vin had found her long before that. He had tracked her to the shelter weeks earlier, and his own daughter, a warm woman with a small noodle shop, had quietly taken Hua in. For the first time in years, Hua woke to people who spoke her name with respect. They guided her hand instead of moving her chair. They told her the rice was warm, and this time it truly was. The forgotten old woman became the quiet heart of that little shop. Regulars came just to sit and talk with her. Blind as she was, she had never once been seen so clearly. Then one rainy evening, the little bell over the door rang, and a thin, ragged woman stepped in out of the cold, holding a child by the hand. Chong. She had nowhere left to go. She did not know whose shop it was. She only smelled warm broth on a cold night and followed it inside, the way the hungry always do. Hua heard the footsteps cross the floor. A mother knows the weight of her own child. Even after everything, she did not freeze. She did not gloat. She simply turned toward the sound and said, "Sit down, child. You sound tired. The rice is warm tonight." That was the moment Chang finally broke. Not from losing the money or the home or the man, but from being handed the one thing she had never once given her mother: mercy. gnaw across the floor by memory, found her daughter's wet face with two gentle hands and wiped the tears away, just as she had done when Trang was small and afraid of the dark. She forgave her, but forgiveness and forgetting are not the same, and some debts you keep paying long after you are forgiven. Trang would carry that rainy night for the rest of her life. Juan never got her eyes back. She never needed them. She had always seen people for exactly what they were, while the daughter, with perfect sight, had been blind to everything that mattered. Everything we hand to the people around us, every cruelty and every kindness, has a way of finding the road back to our own door. If you believe what goes around comes around, subscribe to Comma Tales and tap the next story. Some doors close so the right ones can finally open, and this next one will stay with you.